I recently watched this horror movie called Picnic at Hanging Rock, and the only reason that I found out about it was because I was looking up on Reddit girly horror, and that was one of the things that came up. But while I was watching, I was just so god-awfully bored. It was visually stunning, okay, so the film nerds don't need to come after me. I was just like not scared at all. Wait, one of the picture frames on my wall is just like not straight. Let me go fix it. Okay, I'm sorry about that, but that led me to the question why fear was something that I actually wanted to experience from this movie, because it's counterintuitive. Fear is something that we experience that we consider to be generally unpleasurable, but for some reason horror movies kind of make us want that feeling, and I was disappointed when that one horror movie that I watched did not have me scared. What is that noise? Am I like literally losing my mind right now? I think it's generally coming from that direction, but I don't know what's happening. Let me see. Over here, like kind of like in this area. The noise is definitely getting a lot louder. I don't know if I'm like just like freaking out for no reason, but I feel like it's coming from behind the picture frame. It was the same frame that was just tilted right now, and I shouldn't have got it from that estate sale. I don't know. Oh my god, tilted again. Oh my god, tilted again. I'm freaking out right now. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna take it off and maybe see if I can like destroy it or burn it or like something like that. Like, it's true. My name is Uzma. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in neuroscience, which means that I don't know much, but I do know more than you, unless you also graduated with a bachelor's in neuroscience or you have like a PhD or something. In which case, shut up. As you saw in my intro, I'm wondering why is horror enjoyable? Scary stuff is something that we should avoid rationally, but for some reason when it comes to a horror movie, we're seated, we have our fork and our spoon, and we're ready to eat. I don't get it. People say it's enjoyable because of the rush of adrenaline, but to that I say you're wrong, because then EpiPen abuse would be all the rage in North America, and Charlie XCX would not be singing Keep Bumming That, she would actually be singing Keep Injecting That. You have no rebuttal, I know. The purpose of this venture is to answer this question with my degree, and other questions too, because I really don't want that 4 years to go to waste, and also to make that information accessible and fun. The law does not want to know how I'm allegedly getting access to all these academic articles for researching this video, allegedly. If you have ever wondered this question yourself, or you're just wanting to step inside of my mind, I'm going to walk you through number 1, parts of the brain that are active during horror movie watching. A horror manipulates your brain into feeling fear, and ultimately how that fear feels rewarding to us. How can fear be something that we want to experience? Well, my friendly viewer, you are about to learn. We have to take it back to the very beginning because yes, we all think we know what fear is, but what is it actually? Dr. Adolphs defines fear as the central state of any organism linking a stimuli to behavior. So like what's going on in your mind between when you see something scary versus when you react to it. For example, the stimulus could be you're going on a walk in the woods and you see a bear. The bear is the stimulus. Behavior would be getting down if it's brown or fighting back if it's black. I don't know if that's true. I'm not an expert in bear behavior. I'm barely an expert in neuroscience, but I can research, so you should look that up yourself. Or in the case of a horror movie, the scary stimulus could be somebody like creepily smiling at you. I'm referencing the horror movie Smile, and then the behavior would be your heart going ba-doom, 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 ba-doom. Makes sense. I think it's kind of important to differentiate between fear and anxiety because I feel like we tend to lump them together, but fear is kind of what's going on inside of your brain in response to a perceived threat, whereas anxiety is what's going on inside of your brain in response to a non-existent threat that could like potentially exist or something like that, but it hasn't actually happened yet or may never happen at all. Haven't we all been there? As for the function of fear in the brain, it's supposed to increase your attention so that you orient yourselves towards whatever the scary stimulus is. It's like a survival mechanism. It's like tunnel vision so that you can focus your attention on whatever could potentially like do that to you. And I'll show you an example of how this attention thing works in a scene from Conjuring 2. They did this study while they were tracking people's eye movements while watching the horror movie Conjuring 2, and I'll have you do the same thing. I'm just gonna have you focus your attention on where your eyes are in a particular scene. Roll clip. Ooh, scary. Got the results back of the eye tracking. Okay, as you can see in that first clip, people's eyes are looking everywhere, symbolized by those little red dots, but when the jump scare comes, all of your attention is focused on the nun's face. And it's kind of interesting because everything else in the frame seems to be a little bit darker so that you're kind of forced to focus your attention on the nun's face, so that is really scary. I don't know if they did that on purpose, but I'm seeing it. So fear can potentiate attention. It can also potentiate learning, like fear learning what's scary to you. And when I say potentiate, that basically just means to increase the effect or power of. I'm not changing my vocabulary for you. You learn, you get on my level, okay? The result of that fear is either two things. It's freezing or fight or flight. That sounds like three things, but all the papers said it was two things: freeze or fight or flight, freeze or fight or flight, but it's okay. Like in an actual real life situation, when your body is actually threatened, you'd want your body to get up and get moving. Once the threat is gone and dealt with, you get this feeling of relief, obviously, and I originally thought that it was that feeling of relief that made horror movies kind of feel good, why we continue to watch them, but that's not the exact reason. We'll get into more of that later, don't worry, be patient. We covered some of the psychology of fear, now let's get into the brain and let's get neuroscience. Blah, psychology. I hate you psychology people, so simplistic. I'm just kidding, that's mean, but I do feel like, oh my god, at least in college, there was definitely a sense of superiority with the neuroscience majors versus the psych majors, because we were like, oh my god, we're so much cooler and smarter than you, because we know what norepinephrine is and you don't. And now we're working the same job. So I'm going to ask you to embody your inner pretentious neuroscience major. Get a pen and paper, we're taking notes, we're going inside of the brain, all right? These are the major players of the fear system.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Researchers ran a study placing participants inside of an fMRI machine, and if you don't know what an fMRI machine, it's like this tube-like machine to enter which you lie on your back, it slides you in there, and it's kind of a little claustrophobic, but from inside people can record your brain activity. I wanted to show you guys an example so that I wouldn't just be blabbing about who knows what, but this is not from the study that I'm about to show you guys. I just looked up fMRI picture examples so that you guys could get like familiarized with it, but when they're inside of the fMRI machine, certain parts of the brain will light up depending on whatever they're doing inside of the machine, and those are the parts that are like orangey yellow. So that's what the results look like for this study. What's really cool about this is there's also a screen inside right above where your face would be, and you can watch things there. You can see pictures, you can see movies, and that's exactly what these scientists did. They showed these people movies. What movies did they show them, you ask? Well, they showed them Conjuring 2, and they also showed them Insidious. Honestly, sounds like my worst nightmare, like being inside of that little thing while watching a horror movie with no one on whom to grab. I would have to be handsomely compensated to take part of that study, but they probably got paid like $10 max. Actually, it should say, right? Payment or course credit. Not enough. While they were recording their brain activity, they were able to identify the major parts of the brain that lit up while watching those horror movies. I'm gonna walk you through 8, and I need your attention. Number 1, and repeat after me, okay? Amygdala.
Amygdala.
You ask any neuroscience student what the amygdala does, they're gonna say fear or emotion if they're nasty. The way that I remembered it. That like little purple guy with the sweater vest and the bow tie screaming, amygdala! Amygdala! Just running around like the Inside Out place. I don't know why that was effective. I don't know if it'll be effective for you, but it really cemented in my brain, so I hope that it does something. Amygdala is the fear hub. It sends a lot of messages to a lot of other parts of the brain, one of those being the thalamus. Repeat after me, thalamus.
Thalamus.
It's a big relay station. Imagine it like Grand Central. There are a million trains coming in and then going out. Who knows where? I don't know. That's really kind of all you need to know. I'm not going to bring this up again. Sometimes the amygdala will communicate through the thalamus to another part of the brain. Other times it'll just catch a direct flight. Don't worry about it, okay? It may also send some information to the hypothalamus. Say it, hypothalamus! And by the way, you better be repeating after me every single time I say one of these brain structures, okay? Because you're gonna be talking to your friends about this really cool YouTube video that you watched once, but you're gonna phrase it like, oh, in this article that I read, and then you're gonna trip up because you won't remember how to pronounce hypothalamus. So this is useful to you, actually. It is. So say it now, hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus.
Thank you. This one does the bodily regulation of emotions, like your heart beating super fast in response to something scary, or you getting clammy hands when you're nervous. The hypothalamus basically just sends information to one gland and to another gland, which ends up releasing cortisol in your body, which is the stress hormone. That's what makes you get sweaty hands, makes you get super nervous, so stuff like that, right? That brings us to number 4, the insula.
Insula.
Yes. You better be doing it, I swear to God, I'm going to watch you. Oop. Sorry, that's my 11:11 alarm. I send a kiss every time it's 11:11. Okay, anyway. The insula helps you with self-awareness of your body, being aware of what's going on inside of it. Like, okay, the hypothalamus made your heart race, but the insula is kind of making you be aware of your heart racing, be aware of your hands being all clammy and sweaty and gross. It's a little bit of heightened senses, if you're getting me, but sensing yourself. And number 5 is the, repeat after me, periaqueductal gray.
Periaqueductal gray.
I know, that one is a little bit harder. If you have to spell it out, it's okay. I think I should have some up on the screen. I don't know where I'm gonna put it, but I do want to put it somewhere so that it's like helpful to you and I'm not just saying these words and you can't see them, you know what I'm saying? The periaqueductal gray is a part of the brainstem that regulates the freezing behavior. You know how we said sometimes when we're scared we freeze in order to hide from something? That's basically what it does. The periaqueductal gray makes you like frozen in fear. Next is the nucleus accumbens.
Nucleus accumbens.
Got it? This regulates reinforcing behavior, the things that you do that make you feel good. And I know you kind of like got that little inkling right now. Maybe the nucleus accumbens is gonna be part of the reason for why horror movies feel good while we're watching them. I know, hold on to it. But like if you were actually threatened in a real life threatening situation, the nucleus accumbens would make you get up and motivated to move up out of there. It's kind of more of the fight or flight response, right? How to help you remember it. Nucleus accumbens? Accumben. Accumben, and help yourself out of that scary situation where the bear is attacking you. Accumben, we must flee and leave. Accumben, get up and get motivated to move up out of there. And in this situation, you are Ben. It's not that fun. Number 7 is the prefrontal cortex.
Prefrontal cortex.
Okay, cool. She's like the mom of the group. She helps you evaluate all of the information that you're getting from the environment and then decide, is this worth our time or is this not? Are we just like freaking out for no reason? It can send information back to the amygdala to like shut it down if the amygdala is freaking out a little bit too much, a little bit more than need be. Now what's really interesting is if you were to see a ghost, the amygdala is responding to that information in 120 milliseconds. It's already sending information to the hypothalamus to like start freaking out. It's already sending information to the periaqueductal gray to freeze. That is not enough time for Miss Prefrontal Cortex, Miss PFC, to get that information from the amygdala and then send that information back to the amygdala to be like, don't worry, that ghost is not real, it's literally just a cartoon on your screen. That's part of the reason why horror movies feel so scary, especially jump scares, even when we're in a safe context, because the amygdala is already responding before the PFC can come in and be like, girl, we're fine. It's okay. We believe for like the fraction of a second that the threat is real. Pretty cool, huh? Last but not least, we have the cingulate cortex. Say it with me, the cingulate cortex.
Cingulate cortex.
Yay, we got through all 8. In similar cortical fashion, the cingulate cortex is also doing some like top-down processing, but this is more of the emotional and cognitive control of pain in particular, and like controlling the perception of it. There's a lot of body horror in movies and stuff like that, so I feel like that's where it comes in. Although I can't remember Insidious having like body horror, but anyway. So those were all the parts of the brain structure. I'm glad you were able to sit along to get all of that information in your brain, because now we laid the groundwork for you to better understand how horror movies manipulate your brain into actually feeling scared. I'm really excited to get into this. Are you? I'm excited to get into this. Sorry, maybe it's just because I'm like a nerd.
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother! Do you understand?
Horror would be a dead genre if we were not empathetic creatures. These directors, these creators, they know this and they are playing off of it. And they build all of their horror films off of 2 pillars of human manipulation. Those are number 1, empathy, and number 2, tone. Let's get into empathy. It's not even like we trick ourselves into believing what's on screen is real. It's just that vivid depictions of an experience of what somebody else is going through kind of make us feel like we're also going through it too. And real quick sidebar, I feel like that's the reason why horror movies are so effective at like eliciting emotion out of us, whereas more art house films require like a lot more patience and a lot more learned, lived experience to appreciate in order to get like a same emotional response. But even then, it's not the same emotion and it's nowhere near as intense. I feel like horror is the only genre where no matter what age, size, shape you are, it's so inclusive. Everybody feels the exact same way, which is really cool, right? I feel like that's cool. Horror is for the people. Is that offensive? I don't think it's offensive. But horror movies in particular play off the fact that we can live vicariously through someone. There are 2 different types of illusions defined in psychology. There's place illusions and plausibility illusions. Place illusions is basically getting the implication that, okay, we're actually there in this place where the horror movie is taking place. And then plausibility illusions is like, okay, these events are actually happening. Very cool, very nice. But viewing someone experience an emotion tends to create a copy in your own brain. How do I know this? Yes, they did another study. Love a study. They used the fMRI machine again, okay, but this time they showed participants while they were inside, they showed them pictures of people getting hurt. I'll show you some pictures across the screen. Potentially stubbing their toe, cutting off their thumb. Participants while they were inside of this fMRI machine had to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how much that pain could potentially be perceived as while recording their brain activity so they can see which parts of the brain are lighting up while they're doing this. What they found was that the most active parts of the brain were number 1, the cingulate cortex. Class, who can tell me what the cingulate cortex does again? Who? You're free to use your notes. Just kidding, I'll tell you, it's the emotional control of pain. Now I know I have pretty lousy students. Insula was also active, which is just like that bodily awareness. So what's interesting to me is that these parts of the brain would light up if we were experiencing that pain ourselves, but even when we were watching somebody else experience the potential of like stubbing their toe or cutting their thumb off, those same brain structures lit up. And that's what happens when we're watching horror movies. We're seeing other people go through pain. The kicker is that those who rated the pain higher on those scales 1 to 10, they actually had higher activity in the cingulate cortex and the insula too. People who consider themselves empaths, they're experiencing that. They're not wrong, they're just like really annoying. If you yawned, then congrats, you're a human being and an empath. There are limits to this vicarious thing. Obviously, we tend to mimic the emotions of people that we trust or people that we consider to be fair, which is why we tend to side with the protagonist a lot more instead of the antagonist. Kind of on that same note, stories that are more realistic, horror stories that are more realistic, are considered a lot scarier based on surveys, whose results I will show you. Studies gathered that monster horrors are not nearly as frightening as psychological horrors, because like any one of us could mix our medication with alcohol and start seeing stuff, but not a lot of us will run into a real life monster. Unless you run into my mother-in-law. I don't have a mother-in-law. Not yet, at least. Okay, we deconstructed the first pillar. Done. We did empathy. Now we still have another one remaining, and that one is tone. In order to be really scary, horror movies must balance the safety with the danger, but they also must have a lot of little hints of foreboding that something bad is going to happen. It's like a tightrope. Take it back to The Conjuring 2 and the Insidious movies. While people were watching the movie, they were also recording how scared they felt in a particular moment, and as you can see, it goes up and down and up and down. Not so scared, then scared. Not so scared, then scared. Most effective horror movies are gonna do that. Maybe not the most critically acclaimed ones, but the most effective ones at making you actually scared. Because if you get jump scared back to back to back to back, your brain's gonna get used to that, like it's predictable. You have to establish a little bit of safety intermingled with those little hints of forewarning so that in the back of your mind you feel like, okay, something bad is going to happen. These hints create a looming anxiety that increase your fear when it comes to jump scares. How do I know this? Yeah. You guessed it. Jump scares elicit a startle response in the body. That is the scientific name. It's like an unconscious defensive reaction in response to a sharp noise or like a sudden movement, any sudden change in the environment. It's a reflex. In this 1988 study, they had participants sit down and plan on jump scaring them with like this. It was a burst of noise. Participants weren't told this, obviously, just like I didn't tell you anything. They were under the impression that something else was being tested, but prior to the jump scare, different groups of people were shown different images, either be negative images, neutral images, or positive images. For example, a negative image would be something like one of these, or a spider. A neutral image could be a toaster or a couch, and a positive image could be children smiling, or like a plate of appetizing food, or N-U-D-E-S. I don't know if I can say that out loud. N-U-D-E-S of the opposite gender. Because 1988 was a more heteronormative time than it is now. I don't know, they didn't care to ask. Wonder if they would have got different results if one of them was gay. You show a lesbian woman a picture of a sausage, and that's actually a negative image instead of a positive one. And then there goes your hypothesis. You have to run the whole experiment again. Or maybe you wouldn't even know. Anyway, they showed them these pictures, jump scared them, all while recording their heart rate. And they found that the startle response was a lot greater for the ones that were shown negative images in comparison to the participants that were shown neutral ones or positive ones, because they had like a higher heart rate, right? That's what horror movies are always trying to emulate. You know how a lot of horror movies start out with like one scary scene before starting at like the actual beginning of the story with like the main characters and everything like that? Yeah, that's their negative image, so that you kind of start off on a scary foot and the jump scares do hit harder when you do get jump scared. You can also set the tone by having scary music as well. I don't know if you've seen like videos of people editing horror movies with much happier, lighter music in the background, and it does not like feel scary at all anymore. Instead, it's just like kind of silly. It doesn't feel as frightening. They need to give you a little bit of negativity so that the jump scares hit home. Sorry, I just wanted to come in closer to the camera because I was trying to fix my mascara. Wait, this is kind of cute, this angle. Maybe I should have filmed it like that. Oh blah, this is already done. You get it, it's all about setting the tone, baby.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Yes.
That brings us to the final section of this video. We've had much fun discussing which parts of the brain lit up while we're watching horror movies and how horror movies manipulate your brain into feeling scared. But there's still two questions we have to address. Number one, why do you stay and watch even though you do feel fear? It's counterintuitive. And number two, why does it feel good? And to answer that first question, we need to recall to way back when. Are you guys gonna remember what this is? You can look at your notes, I guess. Nucleus accumbens. Do you remember when I was like on about that? Ah, accumbens. That's the motivating behavior to make you get up and do something that will make you feel better. Remember, the question is, why do you still watch a horror movie even though you do feel fear? There is limited research in this topic for horror movies, so we are extrapolating to the maxillating. Pinky promise you'll stick with me here, okay? Thank you. So they did this study, but they did it with mice, and apparently we're a lot like them. I titled this section Perversion because, like mice, we can literally want something that is actually harmful to us, and I don't know where your mind is going right now, but I would rather it not go down the gutter, okay? In this case, the harmful thing to mice was pressing a lever that would either deliver them food or an electric shock. More often than not, it would be the electric shock, okay? The mice knew this. The mice knew that 80% of the time they were going to get a shock instead of that food, right? It's kind of like how you know you're gonna get punished when you watch a horror movie, and that punishment is going to be fear. So not an ideal thing to do to go press that lever or to go watch a horror movie, okay? Like rationally. But in this experiment, scientists injected certain chemicals into certain parts of the little mouse brains that would effectively shut parts of the brain down, making those parts useless.
Okay, girls, the purpose in doing this is that in eliminating the function of a certain brain structure, we're able to say what the mouse would do if it didn't exist and compare it to a mouse that, you know, has it normally functioning. By doing that, we can isolate the certain function of that brain structure and see directly what it actually does. Whatever the mouse doesn't do is what the function of that brain structure is. We got it?
Which parts did they shut off? They shut down the nucleus accumbens. When the core of the nucleus accumbens was shut down, the mice pressed the lever less than they did when nothing was shut down, when everything was normal with their brain. This shows to us the value of the nucleus accumbens core. Okay, stick with me. The fact that when the core of the nucleus accumbens was off, there was less reaching for that lever means that when it is on and when it is functioning, just like normal, like normally all parts of our brain are on and they're ready to be active, right? The nucleus accumbens core will make us reach for punishment. Now I'm saying core instead of the nucleus accumbens because there are like two parts to the nucleus accumbens, but I thought that that would get a little bit too confusing, so I'm just focusing on the main part of it, yeah? So the core is important in keeping us engaged in a situation that could be perceived as life-threatening. It keeps us in our movie seats. When the core is off, the mice avoided the stressful stimuli. And when the core is on, just like us, like normally the core is on, okay, it's ready to be going, they reached for the lever, even though they probably knew it was going to be delivering an electric shock, just like us reaching for the movie, even though we know that we're going to get scared. So the nucleus accumbens core is going to keep us in our seats. It's going to outweigh the reward of watching a horror movie with the punishment of it. Does that make sense? I really hope it makes sense because honestly it was kind of convoluted to me and I feel like I know a little bit more than maybe, you know, somebody who doesn't know anything about neuroscience at all. So if that did not make sense, I am so sorry. I tried so hard. You're always free to ask me questions in the comments and we could discuss a little bit further maybe. I don't know if that would help you at all. Now we still need to know that second question. Okay, what is this reward? Why does it feel good? And this has not been proven anywhere academically. I just have a theory, okay? I think that this is the work of the prefrontal cortex, the mom of the group. It's an educated guess. It's a true hypothesis. It's already known that Ms. PFC tells the amygdala to chill out if we're freaking out for no reason. That's where all the higher level decision making happens. It feels good to be soothed. It feels good to be told everything's going to be okay. So is it so far out of line to assume that maybe the PFC is also communicating with the nucleus accumbens to tell it to sit down and watch that horror movie because it's not actually harmful? The PFC tells you nothing's going to happen to you. I think it does this through the happy drug, dopamine. All parts of the brain have to communicate with each other in one way or the other. They often do this through sending chemicals with each other, one of those being dopamine. And you can get hits of dopamine by doing anything that you consider to be rewarding, like eating ice cream, taking a work break, cocaine. It's true, or like literally watching a horror movie. I think the PFC sends dopamine to the nucleus accumbens core because if anyone, it's going to be the PFC that knows that you're not actually in danger while watching a horror movie. So you watch a horror movie, you feel that fear, you continue to feel that fear, but the PFC is constantly telling you, it's okay. It's okay, we're good. It's like this weird mixture of fear and safety that is actually really nice, and you're not gonna get such a sense of safety without having such fear elicited out of you while watching a horror movie. Does that make sense? That's why I titled this section Perversion, because it's like both that fear and that safety that feels good. So that's my hypothesis. If you ever run that experiment, tag me, cite me. I don't know if you could cite a YouTube video. The TLDR is that the PFC knows that you're safe and makes the decision to stay and watch the horror movie, sends dopamine to the nucleus accumbens core to actually make you sit and watch the horror movie. Yeah? This is speculation, but I don't think it's that far off, like, at all. Does that make sense why horror movies actually feel good to watch, even though we're constantly feeling that fear? I don't know if this could also be extended to, like, bungee jumping or, like, cliff jumping or something like that, because that's a little bit different. Like, your body's actually, like, flying through the air. That's a much different sensation than you sitting down and watching a horror movie. But I think some of that probably comes into play. I don't know. That's just me trying to see if it's applicable anywhere else other than watching a horror movie. But a horror movie is such a distinct and unique experience that I think is really interesting to see, like, what actually goes on in the brain while we're watching it, right? So yes, that's all I have for you. I've always been literally terrible at conclusions because I hate writing them. Let's just run it back, okay? We talked about fear itself, what fear actually is. We talked about which parts of the brain activate while we feel fear, and specifically while we watch horror movies. And then we talked about how horror movies manipulate your brain into feeling that fear, and then finally why that fear feels good. So yes, oh my gosh. I hope you enjoyed this video. I do plan on making some more because there are just like a million questions that I see pop up into my head every day that can be explained with neuroscience. And I just think neuroscience is the best way to answer modern questions because, like, it's the actual answers, you know what I'm saying? It's the actual description of what's going on inside of your brain. Let me know if you have any ideas for what you would like to see in the future. I usually make different type of content, and I do plan on still making that. Like, on TikTok, I might open a second channel, but for now, we're just gonna focus on these silly little neuroscience videos that I think are a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed. Give this video a like if you did. Subscribe if you would like to, because there are more to come. I'm done with my coffee, so goodbye. Bye. Goodbye. Bye-bye.